The room stank of arrogance. Every species gathered in the grand convocation hall of the Galactic Council carried that same air, like they'd already written humanity off, and they were just here to make it official. The shimmering blue walls pulsed with quiet energy, high above a floating platform where a single human stood, surrounded by hundreds of delegates. Elias wasn't his name, not anymore. They stripped that when Earth was banished. The last man to speak for humanity was called Subject 9. That was all the title the Council allowed him after what they called the Rebellion of Terra. His face was still bruised from the last interrogation, but his eyes, those eyes didn't flinch. He looked around at the gelatinous Akarans, the skeletal Thrix, the smug-faced Zoran bureaucrats who barely masked their disgust. All of them had come to see a funeral, but they didn't know what was dying. "You have committed crimes against interstellar order," a voice boomed from the dais. It belonged to the Vrel Dominion's speaker, a creature that looked like a pile of bones welded together with wires. "You spread your defiance like a disease. You breed chaos. Your technology, your biology, your war hunger, it must be quarantined." There wasn't even a vote. Just a long silence and then a shimmering flash as a symbol blazed in the air. Exile. They stripped Earth of all trade, closed its star lanes, and passed a blockade law. No contact, no aid, no acknowledgement. Earth was now considered a feral world. Subject 9 stood still, breathing slowly, fists clenched so tightly his nails cut his palms. No one would know what he was about to do. No one would believe a cornered species could ever fight back. The guards shoved him toward the teleportation ring, and in seconds, he was gone, returned to the burned blue orbit of Earth, to a planet left to rot. But Earth had changed in those 10 years of war. Back on the ground, cities still glowed red with old bomb scars. Skyscrapers now held rail cannons on their roofs. Artificial moons blinked in sequence across the sky, human-made sentinels watching the stars. Earth had stopped asking for help. They'd stopped begging. They had started building. The resistance that rose during the blockade wasn't built on hope. It was built on fury. When the Council turned its back, humanity turned to itself. Underground labs churned out tech that made old Earth weapons look like toys. AI systems once banned were now training soldiers in virtual combat fields. Even children could simulate piloting a fleet by the time they hit 14. Subject 9, now known as Commander Rafe, stepped out of the re-entry pod and looked across the blackened skyline of New Boston. A young man rushed up to him. "Sir, it's done. The Scourge fleet is fully operational. All 39 dreadnoughts await your orders." Commander Rafe didn't blink. "Good. We leave tonight." The Council thought exile was a punishment. They never understood what happens when you corner a predator. They had exiled Earth. But Earth wasn't coming back for acceptance. It was coming to dominate. The Scourge fleet hovered in Earth's exosphere like steel predators waiting to pounce. 39 dreadnought-class warships, hulking angular beasts bristling with energy lances and plasma cannons, sat in perfect formation. Each bore the insignia of Earth's rebirth, a broken chain overlaid with a burning planet. Commander Rafe stood aboard the command bridge of Oblivion 1, the lead dreadnought. The interior was as brutal as the man who built it. Gray alloy walls, no unnecessary interfaces, just war-focused function. Displays showed tactical readouts, star charts, and surveillance from long-range drones spread across the system. He stared at the hologram of the Galactic Council's territory. "They think we're isolated," Rafe muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Lieutenant Harlan, his second-in-command, nodded. "They've got no idea. The blockade made us smarter. Meaner. Rafe's jaw clenched. Good. That means we can hit them harder. When Earth had been cast out, the world turned into something primal. No longer chasing peace. No longer looking to fit in. The Council had forced humanity into a corner and left it to rot. What they didn't expect was that human resilience wasn't powered by hope. It was fueled by vengeance. The moment the Council withdrew, humanity did what it always did when faced with extinction. It adapted, it evolved, and it prepared. The blockade hadn't isolated Earth. It had unified it. No more petty nations, no more borders. Humanity became a single war machine. Governments collapsed or merged under the brutal efficiency of the Ascendancy Pact, Earth's new military government. Scientists once focused on civilian technologies were redirected toward weapons research. Entire cities were repurposed into factories. Education was replaced with training. And all of it was preparing for this moment. Rafe opened the communication channel to all dreadnoughts. His voice echoed through every corridor, every deck, every heart that had survived the long exile. This is not a mission of war. This is a message written in blood. The Council believed they could erase us, that they could exile us into silence. But we have returned not with words, but with steel, fire, and fury. We are humanity, and we do not forget. A wave of cheers erupted through the comms, not wild celebration, just the guttural sound of soldiers who had waited too long, lost too much, and trained too hard. The first strike wasn't random, it was calculated. They targeted Zoltris 9, a minor planet that had served as a Council military depot, a world far from the core, manned mostly by Thrix troopers and bureaucratic scum. It wasn't a capital. It was a statement. When the Scourge fleet arrived, they didn't open negotiations. They didn't send diplomats. They deployed orbital bombardment followed by surgical strike teams. Human Marines in black adaptive armor stormed the surface, moving with terrifying efficiency. Commander Rafe watched the battle unfold from orbit. Every transmission was logged. Every death, every strike, every cry from the Council's defenders, it was all recorded. Within 4 hours, Zoltris 9 was dust and ash. The fleet's AI uploaded the footage onto every known interstellar data stream. A warning wrapped in footage of destruction. Earth doesn't forget, and now we do not forgive. The Council convened in panic. For the first time in centuries, the Grand Convocation Hall wasn't filled with smug indifference. It was chaos. The Vrel Dominion's ambassador slammed its skeletal limb against the floor. This is an act of annihilation. Earth has declared war. No, said the Joran envoy, voice trembling. They've declared judgment. Fear rippled through them, not just because of what Earth had done, but how fast it had done it. The blockade was meant to cripple them, yet somehow humanity had built a war machine from the ruins. What no one dared say aloud was the truth burning in every council member's mind. Humanity hadn't just survived exile, it had thrived in it. Back on Earth, celebrations were muted. There were no parties, no parades, only silent recognition. This was only the beginning. Rafe didn't see victory in burning a single outpost. He saw it as the first domino. He gathered with his war council, scientists, tacticians, and the last surviving Terran generals. Holograms displayed enemy fleets, weak points in the Council's outer colonies, and known species that had once traded with Earth under the table. Zoltris will stir the nest, said General Toma, an old warhound with cybernetic implants riddling his skull. They'll respond fast. We can't wait for it. Rafe nodded. I don't want to. Let them come. They launched Phase 2 the following week. Strike teams, small, elite human units, were deployed across the galaxy. Their mission wasn't just destruction, It was psychological warfare. In council markets, they hijacked networks and played footage of the Zoltris massacre. In core worlds, they seeded the airwaves with recordings of Earth's black sites, secret labs where humans had broken council biotech barriers and created new soldiers bred from pain and precision. Even the council's elite assassins, once used to crush rebellions, were found dead in their own chambers, messages carved into their chests in Terran script. "We are awake." The council tried to mount a defense. They rallied fleets, enforced martial law, and offered peace talks through third parties. Rafe laughed when he heard that. He didn't want peace. He wanted justice. And that only came in one currency: blood. But deep inside, not every human was cheering. There were whispers among the lower ranks. Not everyone believed in the total war strategy. Some still hoped for reconciliation. That night, Rafe stood before the War Memorial in New Boston, a towering wall of names etched into obsidian. Names of those who died in the early chaos after the exile, families who starved, children lost to the blockades, scientists executed by the Council for refusing to surrender Terran blueprints. He placed his hand on the cold surface and closed his eyes. "It's not revenge," he whispered. "It's restoration." But even he wasn't sure anymore. When the next Council fleet arrived, 300 warships strong, they expected a brutal skirmish. They brought reinforcements. They brought dread. They expected resistance. What they got was extinction. Human dreadnoughts emerged from asteroid fields and cloaked positions, opening fire with kinetic rails and shockwave cannons that tore through shields like paper. Earth's new AI-controlled drones danced through space like vipers, slipping past defenses and piercing hulls. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Only 2 council ships survived, and only because Rafe let them. He wanted them to tell the others. He wanted fear to spread faster than his ships ever could. But Rafe also knew what was coming next. The Council wasn't just going to fight. They were going to unleash their own monsters. And deep in the black folds of space, something else was stirring. Something even the Council had hidden away. Something they thought humanity would never live long enough to awaken. Rafe watched the stars that night and whispered to them like an old soldier to his ghosts. "Bring it all. We're not afraid anymore." The silence after victory was worse than the war itself. That eerie calm between battles, when ships hovered in orbit like predators digesting a kill, and soldiers waited with blood in their veins, unsure where the next blow would come from. Commander Rafe stood in the upper observatory of Oblivion 1, staring at a holographic projection of Council space. They had taken Zoltris 9, shattered the border fleets, and humiliated the interstellar order. But in war, victory was never the end. It was just the first scream that brought everything else crawling out. The Council's silence wasn't fear. It was preparation. He could feel it. Lieutenant Harlan entered quietly, datapad in hand. "Intercepted comms from Zoran Prime. Coded at Omega Tier. They've released something." Rafe turned slowly. "Something?" Harlan nodded, visibly pale. "A unit designation we haven't seen in 100 years. Codename, Helix Protocol. Council records scrubbed every reference to it after the Orion War." That name rang like a blade unsheathed in Rafe's memory. Helix. The word had surfaced in ancient Terran intelligence archives, a ghost of a project designed not for war, but for extinction. Bioengineered entities, neither machine nor flesh, grown in deep cryovaults on forbidden moons. Creatures with no allegiance, weapons too powerful to control. The Council only used them when faced with annihilation. And now, they thought humanity qualified. Within days, human forward outposts began to vanish. No alarms, no distress calls. Just silence. Recon teams sent to investigate found charred remains, ships turned inside out, crew members dissected mid-battle, no signs of laser or kinetic damage, just shredded metal, melted bulkheads, and flesh so twisted it looked sculpted. One transmission survived. A final, fractured clip from a Terran scout named Hale. "They don't move like anything I've seen. No comms, no engines. They phase through hulls. No, not teleport. They shift, like the space bends for them. We fired. Full plasma. Didn't even slow them down." I saw Brooks scream. Then, nothing. Gone. The audio cut with a high-pitched screech, like steel grinding through bone. Rafe watched that footage in silence, alone in the tactical chamber. The lights dimmed, and he pressed both palms against the cold surface of the war table. "They've brought nightmares," he muttered. General Toma stormed in minutes later. "We need to retreat from the outer sectors. We're not fighting ships anymore, Rafe. These aren't soldiers. They're exterminators." "No," Rafe said flatly. "We hold the line." Toma barked. "You don't hold against Helix protocol. You run, regroup, and pray they burn out before they reach core worlds." Rafe turned sharply, his voice cold. "We've come too far to run. Earth didn't crawl out of the grave to play defense. We'll fight this." But even he could feel the doubt clawing at the back of his mind. What they were facing wasn't just a Council counterattack, it was a purge. And the Helix entities didn't fight like soldiers. They didn't negotiate. They didn't sleep. Within 2 weeks, 10 human colonies were erased. Not conquered. Erased. The data left behind showed bizarre energy patterns, gravitational anomalies, and shredded code that infected AI systems with raw terror. Not fear. Terror. AI that had trained in millions of simulations shut down themselves when confronted with Helix data. The human population panicked. For the first time since the exile ended, fear returned to Earth. Children weren't training anymore. They were hiding. Entire divisions refused to deploy. Rumors spread fast. Helix monsters that fed on thought, that whispered through walls, that wore human faces to get close before tearing through flesh like paper. Rafe knew the tide had turned. They had woken a force even the Council was afraid of. But that also meant the Council had broken their own laws. The use of Helix protocol violated every interstellar treaty, even among their own species. That was their weakness. Rafe called an emergency war council. The top brass gathered, weary-eyed, many of them haunted from the recent losses. "They've made their move," Rafe began. "They brought demons to a knife fight. We don't match them in tech or numbers, but we're not going to." Toma growled. "Then how do we win?" Rafe pointed to a planet near the galactic edge, Veltrin V, a black site. Uncharted. No diplomatic presence, no life signals, yet their surveillance drones showed Helix energy trails leading to and from it. "We hit them there," Rafe said. "We take the fight into their hidden labs. We expose them. The Council's elite species won't tolerate Helix exposure. They'll turn on each other." It was madness, but it was also the only chance they had left. Operation Ash Veil was launched within 48 hours. Rafe personally led the strike team, something no commander should have done, but no one questioned him. Veltrin 5 was a dead planet, crusted in black ice and dust storms, with a single entrance into a buried facility shaped like an obsidian needle. They breached at midnight cycle. Inside was worse than they imagined. The corridors weren't built. They were grown, organic walls pulsing faintly with light, lined with twisted metal. Human bodies were stitched into the walls, alive in some cases, screaming without mouths. Genetic experiments long banned by every council code were thriving here. Rafe's team pressed deeper, encountering Helix entities for the first time. They didn't walk. They unfolded. Like watching physics collapse in real time, limbs that bent backwards, faces with no symmetry, and voices that sounded like thousands speaking at once. Bullets didn't work. Plasma slowed them. Only raw, focused electromagnetic bursts disrupted their patterns. Half the team died in minutes. But Rafe got to the core. There, he found the Helix birthing chamber, a throne of bone, flesh, and machinery. At its heart was something not even the Council had seen. A Terran child. Barely 8 years old, eyes pitch black, veins glowing blue, floating in a stasis field. The Helix brain core. They had taken Earth's genetics during the exile. They had created a hybrid, not just a weapon, a message. You wanted war, a mechanical voice whispered through the walls. You wanted domination. You are now part of the machine. Rafe did the only thing he could. He overloaded the fusion cores of the facility. The team barely escaped. Veltrin Voss went up in a supernova-scale explosion. The Helix chamber and its abominations turned to ash in the void. But Rafe wasn't celebrating. Because the last thing he saw, before the blast, the child opened its eyes and smiled. Not a Helix smile, a human one. The blast from Veltrin Phi was visible across 3 star systems. For a few hours, the galaxy went quiet. No Council dispatches, no Helix attacks, no Terran offensives, just static silence. But silence was never a gift in war. Back aboard Oblivion 1, the crew awaited Commander Rafe's return like survivors watching the sky after a storm. The Dreadnought's deck was scarred from battle, the medbays overloaded with the wounded, and the ship AI had flagged 27 different crew members for psychological re-evaluation. The Helix encounters had left marks that didn't bleed. When Rafe finally walked onto the command bridge, the silence broke with sharp salutes. But no cheering. The man who had once rallied Earth's fractured remnants with pure defiance now looked like something chipped away from within. Burn marks across his armor, a broken eye lens hanging from his temple, and a stare that didn't blink. Lieutenant Harlan approached, stiff as steel. "Did we get it, sir?" Rafe didn't speak. He walked straight to the central console, inserted a neural key, and initiated a secure channel to the Ascendancy Council on Earth. Faces blinked into existence on the holo panel. Scientists, war generals, strategists, and the Supreme Overseer, an old hard man named Bannock. "Veltrin's gone," Rafe said, voice hollow. "But it's not over." Bannock narrowed his eyes. "Explain." "There was a child," Rafe said. "Human. Engineered as the Helix core. Our DNA twisted with whatever biocode they've been using. The Council didn't just weaponize monsters. They used us to do it." Murmurs erupted across the panel. Rafe held up a data crystal, flicking his fingers to display the last image, those black eyes and that haunting smile. "This is their message. They didn't exile us to remove us. They exiled us to evolve us into something else." Bannock leaned forward. "You think they're building a new species?" Rafe nodded slowly. "Not building. Breeding. Humanity 2.0. Designed for obedience. Grown for conquest." The implication hit like a thunderstrike. Earth's survival had never been the plan. The Council hadn't feared human destruction. They feared human ascension. And to prevent it, they had tried to twist evolution itself. Suddenly, the war had a new front. It wasn't just about vengeance, it was about identity, about survival of the true human line. And Earth wasn't unified anymore. That same day, dissent broke out across the homeworld. News of the Helix child spread like wildfire. Conspiracy channels, pirate broadcasts, and militia factions began claiming Earth's own leadership had known, had collaborated, or at least ignored the warning signs. Cities that once trained child soldiers now had protesters marching through streets with signs that read, "No gods, no monsters, no hybrids." Commander Rafe returned to Earth under urgent recall. As his shuttle descended through the smog-choked skies of New Boston, he could see the changes. Fortified checkpoints, energy barricades, drones buzzing overhead. The war had turned inward. The Ascendancy Council convened in a bunker beneath the old UN ruins. As Rafe stepped into the chamber, Bannock greeted him with a hardened expression. "You've become a symbol," Bannock said, not kindly. "And symbols can be dangerous when they start shaking." Rafe stared him down. "People are scared, and they should be." "They're not scared of the Council," Bannock said quietly. "They're scared of you." That night, Rafe met with his old comrade, Marin, a veteran-turned-rebel who now led a breakaway militia called the Trueborn. "You saw the Helix kid, didn't you?" she asked, lighting a low-burning data sig. "Don't lie. The people are already talking." "I saw it," Rafe said. "It was made from us. It looked human. It acted almost human. But it wasn't." "Then why didn't you kill it yourself?" "I couldn't," Rafe admitted. "Not because I wouldn't, because I couldn't." It smiled at me, Marin, like it knew me. She exhaled. "Maybe because it is us." Marin didn't believe in the war anymore. She believed in separation, cutting off from Earth's ascendancy, forming an independent colony on Titan, away from both Council and Helix influence. But Rafe couldn't run. He had seen too much, and he still believed in finishing what was started. Before dawn, riots broke out in 3 major cities. A biolab in old Shanghai was torched by civilians accusing it of cloning Helix tech. A Terran general was assassinated in a bunker blast. His killer wore a mask with the Helix spiral carved into it. Then came the worst message of all, from the Mars orbital relay. A scrambled signal, not from the Council, not from Earth, from the child. "You made me to survive. They made me to conquer. I belong to neither. I am what comes next." Rafe played it 12 times, analyzed every frequency. It wasn't faked. The voice pattern was a perfect hybrid, Terran bass with unknown modulations. The child hadn't died in the explosion, it had escaped, and it was learning. A dark theory began to take root in Rafe's mind. What if the Council hadn't lost control of the Helix program? What if they'd let it go? Earth had forced the galaxy to fear it. Now the Council had given that fear a new face, one that looked like Earth, talked like Earth, but wasn't Earth. That night, Rafe stared at a mirror in his quarters. His reflection looked back with the weight of 2 wars pressing behind the eyes. He touched the mirror and whispered, "What if we're not the monsters anymore?" What if they were? He made a decision. No more waiting. If the Helix child was out there, somewhere in the deep dark between systems, it had to be found. Not by the Council, not by Earth's politics. By him. Rafe ordered a classified operation, codenamed Ghost Hunt. Only a handful of hand-picked veterans were selected. No AI, no data leaks, just old-school infiltration. They would track the child, contain it, and if necessary, end it. It wasn't vengeance anymore. It was mercy. But unknown to Rafe, the Helix child wasn't hiding. It was calling. And others were beginning to answer. Across abandoned sectors, faint energy pulses were activating old Council satellites. On ruined worlds, machines long dormant lit up with strange signals, helix frequencies layered with human voice echoes. The child was broadcasting. Not for help, for unity, because it wasn't alone. There were more. The ship wasn't marked, no nameplate, no lights, just matte black hull plating and heat scrubbers to keep it invisible to long-range scanners. It was an old stealth prototype from Earth's early rebellion years. Abandoned tech, outdated but untraceable. Commander Rafe called her Wraith 1. No crew beyond 6 hand-picked operatives, no AI to monitor them, no uplinks to Earth's war network, total isolation. He didn't need another war. He needed answers. They departed from a refueling station hidden in Saturn's rings. The team said little during liftoff. Veterans all, scarred, silent, loyal only to him. He didn't ask for their belief. He demanded their presence. And they came. Among them was Kyle, an ex-Intel slicer who had once hacked Council War satellites blind. Beside him, Lieutenant Bren, a sniper who never spoke more than 3 words unless bullets were involved. Then there was Dr. Mirel, a geneticist who once vanished after refusing to work on Earth's bioenhancement division. She'd returned when Rafe asked for help. That scared him more than anything. As they slipped into FTL, Rafe activated a map showing helix anomaly reports, spikes in power, strange gravitational warps, subspace echoes in the form of laughter. It was a trail of ghosts. But they weren't chasing phantoms. They were chasing something that remembered them. They reached the first coordinate, System RAL 9, a graveyard sector. 10 abandoned mining colonies, all gutted. Planetary debris circled a red dwarf star like shattered bone fragments. Their approach was silent. Rafe activated visual scans. Kyle muttered, "No comms, no signals. But something's wrong with the light curves on Station 7. Reflections warped, like gravity's distorted." "Scan for phase anomalies," Rafe ordered. The ship pulsed. Dr. Mirel frowned. "Local space is bending unnaturally. That's not warping. That's anchoring. Something's pulling dimensional fabric into a fixed point." "Like what?" Bren asked. Mirel's voice dropped. "Like a child growing a nervous system inside reality." They docked manually. The station's interior was choked in vines of synthetic tissue. Walls pulsed. Lights flickered in rhythmic pulses, like breathing. They advanced slowly, weapons raised. Then they found it. Not the child. A message, etched into the flesh-grown steel, written in perfect Terran script. "I am not your enemy, but you will make me one." Rafe stared at it. "This thing's baiting us," Kale whispered. "No," Mirel said. "It's warning us." They pushed further into the core and found a data terminal, still functional. Kyle jacked in with gloves and began slicing. "Sir," he muttered, "this station logged over 80 energy spikes in the last 3 months, all matched to helix patterns. But there's more. Someone, or something, has been using these stations as broadcast hubs to transmit copies of itself." "Copies?" Rafe asked. "Brainwave echoes, memory fragments, emotion loops, not full consciousness, just impressions." Mirel's face turned pale. "It's replicating its mind across systems." Rafe clenched his fists. "Why?" Before anyone could answer, every panel in the room lit up, not just with data, with images, flashes of Earth, old Earth, bombed cities, children in training fields, executions, famine, and him, Rafe, on the battlefield, helmet off, covered in blood, lifting a crying girl from rubble. The screen zoomed in on the girl's face. Black eyes, blue veins. The child. Rafe staggered back. That's not possible. It recorded you, Morell whispered. From the very beginning. Your DNA, your voice, your leadership. Bren muttered, It's imprinted on you. Suddenly, the station shuddered. Warning lights blinked. Kyle screamed, We've got incoming! Outside, space rippled, like fabric torn in silence. A helix entity emerged, 3 stories tall, limbs folded in sharp fractals, no defined form, just angles and limbs and eyes that blinked in sequence. No ship, no engines, just presence. Shut it down, Rafe barked. They bolted back to Wraith 1. Kyle triggered the overload protocol, frying the station's core as they undocked. The entity didn't chase them. It just watched. And then it vanished into a blue shimmer, folding space around itself like a curtain. Back aboard the ship, the crew was silent. Morell broke it. It didn't attack because it recognized us. More importantly, it recognized you. Rafe paced. We need to know what it's doing, where it's going. Kyle pulled up a map, tracing the broadcast pattern. Every station follows a path. It's spreading its essence like seeds. One trail leads into the cradle void. Rafe froze. That name was banned on every star chart. The cradle void wasn't a system. It was a phenomenon. A dead zone in space where no signals escaped. Council ships vanished there. It was said to be where the first AI wars began and ended. Rafe nodded. Plot a course. Kyle hesitated. Sir, even the Council doesn't go there. Exactly. The trip took 4 days in silence. Every crew member felt it. The void wasn't just empty. It rejected presence. When they arrived, space looked wrong. Stars bent, time hiccuped, and in the center was a single structure, a sphere of metal, half a moon wide, orbiting nothing. The cradle, the helix's true womb. Scan? Rafe asked. Kale frowned. No life signs, no AI signatures, but a heartbeat? They docked. Inside was dark. Not pitch black, emotionally dark. The kind of dark that made you remember pain. As they moved deeper, they found rows of stasis pods. Not monsters, children. Hundreds. Each in mid-growth. Eyes closed. Blue veins. Human shapes. But wrong. Perfect symmetry. No belly buttons. No irregularities. They're building an army, Bren muttered. No, Morell said. They're building a successor. This is a species farm. Then the lights came on, and in the center, on a raised pedestal, stood the child. No longer small, now maybe 12 in appearance. Taller, calm, unarmed. You came, it said in a voice that was both boy and girl. Good. Rafe stepped forward, weapon lowered. Why? He asked. Why build this? The child tilted its head. Because you taught me war, and they taught me survival. Now I will teach the galaxy evolution. You'll be stopped, Rafe said. The child looked sad. Then you haven't understood. I don't want to kill you. I want to inherit you. The chamber began to shake, but not from attack, from awakening. One by one, the children opened their eyes. All at once. They all opened their eyes at once. Hundreds of children. Silent, glowing blue from beneath the skin, each pair of eyes blacker than the void they were born in. Their stares weren't blank like newborns. They were focused, aware. Commander Rafe's finger hovered over the trigger of his sidearm. He felt every instinct from his years of battle scream at him to fire, to shut it down before it was too late. But he didn't. Because none of them moved. The Helix child, now taller, older, almost adolescent, descended the pedestal. Bare feet touched the cold metal with no sound. A thin, artificial breeze moved through the chamber, though Rafe doubted the structure even had environmental systems. "I told you," the child said softly. "I don't want to kill you." Rafe's jaw was tight. "Then what do you want?" "To finish what you started." "I didn't start this," he snapped. "The council did." The child gave a sad smile. "Number you did. When you declared that Earth would not submit. When you unleashed war to claim a place that never wanted you. When you turned exile into vengeance." Kyle's voice cut in over comms. "Sir, we can rig a fusion bomb. It'll vaporize this station. No trace left." Rafe didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the child. "You're manipulating them," he said, "twisting their DNA. You're using humanity as a framework for something else." "I'm correcting it," the child said. "Your kind was always unfinished, emotional, erratic, violent, but so close to perfection. So close." Rafe took a slow step forward. "And these things you're making? What are they? Soldiers?" "They're not soldiers," the child said. "They're heirs." The word echoed in the vast cradle chamber. Dr. Morell whispered from behind. "It's building a civilization." A low rumble rolled beneath their feet. Somewhere deep within the sphere, the systems were activating. Cryopods lit up in sequence. The heartbeat Kyle had detected earlier was growing louder, sinking. "They're linking," Morell said, "creating a network, not artificial intelligence, biological consensus, like a hive mind, but modular, independent yet connected." Kyle's voice turned sharp. "Sir, this is it. If they reach full sync, we'll never shut it down." Rafe knew it too. They were at the tipping point. A second longer, and these Helix-born children would become something new, something far more dangerous than the Council, Earth, or any war ever faced. He looked at the child. "You're using my memories, my face, my leadership. You copied my DNA to anchor their identity." "You gave them purpose," it said. "You showed them what it means to fight for survival." "Survival?" Rafe scoffed. "You're building Dominion." "I'm building peace," the child said, "without the cost of human weakness." The word weakness hit him like a slap. He thought of all the people he'd lost, his wife, his son, his friends burned alive during the early rebellions, the civilians used as shields during council raids, the children who didn't make it through starvation after the blockade. That pain wasn't weakness. It was the reason he fought. He lowered his weapon. "You'll never be one of us." "I don't want to be," the child replied, "but they will be, and they will be better." Cale's voice snapped back in. "Sir, we're out of time. Final confirmation, blow it or stand down." Rafe stared into those obsidian eyes. And then, one of the children stepped forward. A little girl, barefoot, silent, no fear in her face. She looked up at him. "Why are you afraid?" she asked, her voice innocent. "We remember you. You saved us, even if it wasn't real." Rafe felt his throat tighten. They remembered simulations, memories seeded by the Helix core, using his experiences, his DNA, to build empathy models. These weren't just clones. They believed they were saved by him. In another world, another war, he might have. He turned to his team. "Abort the strike." Kyle choked. "Sir?" "Stand down." Dr. Morell's eyes welled with tears. Not sadness, not relief. Just awe. "You're letting them live?" Bren asked. Rafe looked at the rows of children, some holding hands, others blinking slowly, their minds in sync with a future he couldn't predict. "I'm giving them a chance," he said. "That's more than we ever got." They left the cradle sphere without a single shot fired. As Wraith 1 pulled away, the cradle closed behind them, folding itself back into the void like it was never there. Kyle sat in silence. Bren stared out the viewport. Morell finally said what none of them wanted to. "They'll outgrow us." Rafe nodded. "Then we make sure they outgrow our mistakes." Back on Earth, the war was still burning. Council fleets were pressing harder into fringe colonies. Trueborn militias had declared open rebellion. The Ascendancy Council was on the verge of collapse, split between those who wanted peace and those who demanded annihilation of the Helix threat. Rafe returned to a broken planet. And this time, he didn't bring victory. He brought a warning. "They are not our enemies," he told the Council, "but if we push them, they will become something worse than we ever imagined." Supreme Overseer Bannock sneered. "We don't negotiate with experiments." "They're not experiments anymore," Rafe said. "They're a civilization." Bannock's voice was venom. "They're your creation, Commander. If this ends in fire, your name will burn with it." Rafe didn't flinch. "Let it." He walked away. That night, as Earth's fractured factions plotted their next move and the Council massed fleets at the Galactic Rim, a single signal was received across every open channel. "We will not be judged by your past. We are not your legacy. We are your consequence." It was not a threat. It was a promise. The war came like thunder through glass. It began when Council fleets, no longer waiting for diplomacy, launched full-scale offensives into the Helix expansion corridor, annihilating entire systems that showed even a hint of Helix activity. They called it preventative extermination. They used words like containment and preservation. But what they really feared was evolution. Earth, already torn from within, splintered at the seams. The Ascendancy Council struggled to maintain order as thousands of Terrans demanded either alliance or annihilation of the Helix-born. Trueborn militias gained momentum, raiding Earth's labs and executing scientists suspected of collusion. The old scars from exile had never healed. They had just grown calluses. Commander Rafe watched it all unfold from orbit. Back aboard Oblivion 1, now repaired and rearmed, he stood once more on the bridge. But this time not as a hero. To many he was a traitor. To others, a prophet. "They've declared war on both fronts," Lieutenant Harlan said. "The Council and our own. Bannock's issued a planetary decree. All Helix-aligned colonies are to be wiped out." Rafe stared at the tactical display. Red zones expanded with every hour, Earth's own fleet bombing Terran sectors suspected of harboring Helix sympathizers. No trials, no warnings, just fire. "They're afraid," Rafe muttered. "Afraid of what they can't control." Kyle, now reinstated after the Cradle mission, entered from the ops room. "We intercepted Council chatter. They've developed a weapon. Codename, Golgotha." Rafe turned. "What is it?" Kyle hesitated. "Planet killer. Artificial nova bomb. Designed specifically to collapse the Cradle Sphere's coordinates into a singularity. One strike, total annihilation." "And how far along?" "They've deployed it. One dreadnought escorting it across the outer rim." The room went silent. "They're not fighting a war," Morell said softly. "They're committing genocide." Rafe didn't hesitate. "Plot and intercept?" Harlan blinked. "You mean to stop it?" "Sir, Earth will brand us as traitors." "They already have," Rafe replied. "And if we don't act, they'll destroy an entire species that never fired a shot at us." He looked at his crew. each one hand-picked, each one scarred by war and betrayal. This is the line. We either stop becoming the monsters we've always fought, or we cross it, and become them for good. No one argued, because they knew the truth. The only ones left capable of choosing what humanity would become were already in that room. They reached the Council Dreadnought convoy 3 days later. The Vigilance Ascendant was an older model, massive, slow, heavily armored. Its escort fleet was tight, overlapping defense nets and encrypted comms bouncing like steel wire across the void. Rafe didn't want a battle. He wanted a message. He opened wideband comms. "This is Commander Rafe of the Terran Scourge Fleet. You are carrying an unregulated extinction class device. Abort your mission and stand down, or we will disable your vessel." There was silence. Then a response. Calm, male, highborn. "This is Captain Erin of the Vigilance Ascendant. You are a disgraced outcast speaking for a rogue government. We do not negotiate with aberrations." Rafe's eyes darkened. "Then you've made your choice." The battle began in silence. Oblivion 1 launched EMP torpedoes, knocking out the forward sensors of 2 escort ships. Kyle activated cloaking on the flanking strike vessels. Railgun fire punched through shields faster than the Council expected. But the Vigilance Ascendant didn't flinch. It launched the Golgotha. A sleek, coffin-shaped missile, powered by a collapsing dark matter core, hurtled toward the coordinates of the cradle. Rafe didn't blink. "Harlan, intercept that missile. Full thrust." The dreadnought groaned under strain as its thrusters screamed to life. The intercept window was under 2 minutes. If they missed, it would reach the Helix sphere, and the war would end in fire. But Rafe didn't want it to end. Not like this. Not with another genocide. As the Oblivion 1 closed in, Harlan shouted, "We're in range!" "Fire now!" 3 plasma disruptors launched, spinning through the dark like spears. The first 2 missed. The third hit the missile's propulsion core. A silent explosion tore through space, sending a shockwave across the vacuum. The Golgotha was gone. But the price was high. The Oblivion 1 was hit by return fire. Hull breaches, decompression, casualties. As alarms screamed, Rafe dragged himself to the central console. Blood streaked down his temple. He sent one final transmission to the Vigilance Ascendant. "This is not the end. You won't kill them all. They're not your enemy. You are." The Council vessel disengaged. They weren't ready for prolonged battle. Not here, not now. But the damage was done. Earth declared Rafe a traitor that day. A bounty was placed on his head. His name was erased from official records. And deep in the cradle, the Helix children, now fully awake, received the signal. Not of destruction, but of protection. A week later, Rafe met the child again. This time aboard the cradle sphere itself. The child had grown again, now appearing 16. Taller, more human, more calm. "You stopped them," it said. "For now," Rafe replied, "but they'll be back. They always return to the cycle." "Then we break it." The child studied him. "They won't let you live. Earth, the Council. You've betrayed them both." Rafe nodded. "I know. So what will you do now?" He looked around the chamber, the hum of energy, the whisper of futures being built. "I'll stay here. Teach, warn, help you avoid becoming what we did." "You would lead us?" "No," Rafe said. "You don't need another leader. You need a mistake. Someone to remind you what not to become." The child smiled. "You may not be our father," it said, "but you are our beginning." And so Rafe stayed. Not as a soldier, not as a commander, but as a ghost of a dying species, watching the next one take shape, hoping they would choose better. Years passed. Not in silence, but in the hush before a storm. The galaxy, once a cacophony of empires and wars and declarations, seemed to pause, watching, waiting, questioning what the Helixborn were becoming. They didn't expand like conquerors. They didn't invade or demand territory. Instead, they sent messages. Simple, wordless beacons to fringe systems and dead worlds, showing images of rebirth, of technology fused with biology, of minds connected without chains, of unity without control. The Council ignored them at first, then tried to silence the signals. They failed. Earth's ascendancy splintered within a decade. Bannock died under mysterious circumstances. Some said his own guards turned on him. Others claimed the Trueborn assassinated him for dealing with rogue Helix colonies in secret. His replacement, Chancellor Arlen, attempted diplomacy. But diplomacy didn't mean power anymore, because Helix didn't want power. They wanted space, to grow, to evolve. Without war, without old ideologies dragging them backward. Commander Rafe, once Earth's spearhead, now the ghost inside the cradle, watched it all unfold from a distance. His skin aged, his muscles weakened, but his mind remained sharp. Fed by Helix neurotethers, he lived far longer than any Terran should have. Not immortal, just delayed. The Helixborn called him the Fossil. Not out of mockery, but reverence, a living artifact, the proof of what came before, a man who gave them a choice when others only offered chains. One evening, he sat alone on the observation deck of the cradle sphere, gazing into the void. The Helix child, now appearing in its early 20s, approached. It didn't need to speak. They communicated in silence, shared memory flashes, emotional code. But this time it used words. "They're coming." Rafe didn't ask who. He already knew. The Council had regrouped, not just the old regimes, but new ones too. Factions formed from shattered empires, desperate to stop what they didn't understand. Earth was among them. A final alliance, one last stand to claim the galaxy back. They called themselves the Purity Accord. Rafe turned to the child. "You ready for them?" "Yes," it said, "but we will not strike first." "You sure that's wise?" The child nodded. "We are not them. If we become them, we inherit their failure." Rafe sighed, rubbing the aching joints in his hands. "You sound more human every day." "I'm not," it replied, "but I remember what it was like to want to be." He smiled weakly. "That's enough." The attack began at the edge of the cradle's influence. Distant moons and mining outposts converted by Helix networks into learning hubs, peaceful settlements. No weapons, no shields. The Purity Accord incinerated them. They didn't announce war, they didn't offer demands, they just burned. Over a dozen Helix colonies were destroyed in under 48 hours. No survivors, no distinction between adult or child. It was meant to provoke. And it worked. Rafe stood inside the core nexus as the Helix Council, an assembly of the oldest born, now physically indistinguishable from humans, argued. Some wanted to retaliate, to flatten the Accord worlds, to prove their strength. But the child, the first, held them back. "No," it said. "We will not answer violence with violence." Rafe watched the debate unfold with the weariness of an old soldier who had seen too many noble ideals end in graves. "They won't stop," he warned. "You know that." "Yes," the child said, "but we will give them one final chance." A signal was sent, a message broadcast across the Accord's network. It showed the cradle, the children, the farms, the schools. Then it showed one Terran man, gray-haired, broken-eyed, voice calm. "My name is Rafe," he said. "I once led Earth's war against the galaxy. I bled for vengeance. I killed for justice. I buried good men and raised bad ones. I believed we were fighting for survival." He paused. "But I was wrong. We weren't fighting to survive. We were fighting to prove we deserved to." He looked into the camera. "You've made your decision, but this time I will make mine. We will not kneel, we will not bow, we will not run, we will stand. And if you burn us, the galaxy will remember who lit the fire." Transmission ended. The Accord responded as expected. They came with a fleet of thousands, warships spanning kilometers, weapons that folded stars and split moons, but the Helix did not respond in kind. Instead, the cradle opened. From it emerged a sphere of living light, an energy lattice built from Helix consciousness, expanded into physical form. Not a weapon. A mirror, it reflected their war. It showed every ship, every soldier, every war crime, and every lie. And then it stopped. The fleet didn't fire, not because they were moved, but because every ship's AI shut down. Every weapon was deactivated, not by hacking, by choice. The Accord's soldiers wept. Some begged for orders that didn't come, because they saw something no sensor could register. Themselves, what they had become. The fleet retreated. Not in defeat, in surrender. The war ended that day, not with a battle, but with understanding. Rafe died 3 years later. Not in pain, not in glory. He died quietly, surrounded by Helix children, on a small platform orbiting the cradle, his eyes staring at the stars as if trying to remember what it felt like to see them for the first time. The child, now fully matured, delivered the eulogy. "This is the last man who chose to remember the pain, even when it would have been easier to forget. He gave us choice, he gave us patience, and above all, he gave us time." Rafe's body was not buried, it was converted, not into code, but into memory. The Helix stored his essence not to worship, but to learn. They called it the Fossil Archive. A library of failure. So they would never forget where they came from. In time, the Helix didn't replace humanity. They preserved it, not as a species, but as a story. A tale of rage and ruin and redemption. And in that story, one name was always spoken first, not as a savior, but as a warning. Rafe, the last human,